a world where countless labyrinths stretch across the land, waiting for adventurers to explore and conquer. Legends are passed down among the adventurers of this world. Every few decades, in one of the endless labyrinths, a black hole will appear, leading to another world. Those who dare to enter and survive will be granted endless wealth and superhuman strength. In the Baklad Labyrinth, on the 38th floor, in the boss room, a giant monster lay dead on the floor next to two men. One of them was the one who delivered the finishing blow, with short black hair, an expressionless face, and seemingly only one eye. This man is the adventurer Lacan, also known as the One-Eyed Wolf. He sheathed his sword and placed his hand on his chest, paying his respect to the monster he had just killed. The other man was Bod, the adventurer nicknamed the Man-Eating Bear, who laughed at the speed with which Lacan had finished off the monster, saying that this was not surprising to him. Lacan said that Bod's coordination was perfect, and created an opportunity for him to easily finish off the monster. This made the tall man laugh, and he promised that he would continue to do such things for Lacan. The dark-haired man Lacan uses his life-sensing abilities to check for any signs of life in the monster before them, and confirm that there was none left. Lacan was silent for a moment before informing Bod that there was nothing unusual in the area. However, Bod was no longer focused on the monster. He had completely turned and was staring at something else. Bod didn't believe that there was nothing unusual about it, as Lacan had said, and asked the dark-haired man about what he was looking at. Before them stood two figures side by side, their eyes fixed on the dark, infamous black hole, which they had heard a lot about. Lacan said that even with his powers, he couldn't see anything on the other side of the black hole. Bod asked him what he would do, because no one had ever recorded what happens when a person steps into these black holes. The man with dark hair replied that he would go in first, without a moment's hesitation. Bod laughed and followed closely behind. However, when they entered, the two quickly realized there was no ground to stand on, meaning they were falling into darkness. Their bodies continued to be devoured by the endless void of the black hole, which gradually disappeared from the original labyrinth. Both of them fell unconscious shortly afterward. After a while, Lacan woke up to find himself lying on the grass in a forest. He slowly opened his eyes before sitting up with a soft groan. He wondered how long he had slept, because usually he would wake up at the slightest sound. Lacan called out to see if his friend Bod was all right, but only silence was in response. The black hole they passed through also disappeared, and Lacan appeared to be in a forest with vegetation he had never seen before. The world beyond the black hole is truly strange. He used his life-sensing skills again, but the results confused him. The signs of life were too weak, meaning there were no humans in the area, which he can sense using his life sensors. Typically, animals appear as green dots, while humans are red dots that Lacan can detect. However, no red dots appeared. This could mean that Bod has been taken to another place, perhaps even another world. As Lacan's perception began to gradually increase to a range of 1,000 feet, he felt alarmed. A green dot appeared, and he knew he needed to ensure his own safety before worrying about Bod's whereabouts, especially since the blue dot is not an ordinary living being, which belongs to a magical creature. Lacan drew his sword from his storage. One ability still works effectively in this new world, and his old belongings remain intact. He gripped the sword tightly in front of him. He stood still, waiting for the monster to approach him. He wondered if the monster could sense his presence and see him as prey. Suddenly, a monster resembling a wild boar leaped out from the trees. Lacan immediately lunged forward, delivering a single slash to its flank. This caused the monster to crash violently into a tree and fell to the ground, dying instantly. He raised his fist to his chest again to show respect for the creature's death. He realized it belonged to a species of monster he had never seen before. Lacan still believed he could absorb its magical power, and indeed, in just a few seconds, he succeeded, leaving almost no trace. Unlike ordinary animals, the magical beast has a magic stone located near its heart. If Lacan uses his ability to absorb magic, he can steal that magic and use it at will. Just like in his previous world. Lacan realized that he could still fight in this new world. Although he didn't know what he would achieve in this world, he decided to test the limits of his strength and began searching for food and water. However, his plan was quickly interrupted by a girl's scream. This surprised and confused him. His previous life-sensing abilities hadn't detected any humans within range. This led Lacan to believe the scream might have been produced by magic. When using the life-sensing skill again, he discovered two red dots, a sign of human presence. Immediately, he rushed in that direction, determined to learn more about this world. Meanwhile, the two wild boar-like monsters that Lacan had just fought, it was hurtling straight towards a horse-drawn carriage with a knight trying to protect it. Lacan sped through the forest. He jumped from tree to tree. He noticed that the signs of life he had sensed earlier had ceased, and one of the monsters had been thrown off during the chase, but another was still pursuing the humans. As he approached the area, Lacan saw a horse-drawn carriage tied to horses, that there was someone inside. One of the monsters attacked the knight on horseback. This puzzled Lacan, as this person was not one of the human signs Lacan had sensed before. Every living creature possesses magical power that must be detected through the life sensor skill, but he couldn't sense any magical signs from this person. Lacan was certain there were two sources of magic from the people in the carriage, and he could even sense magic from the horses. But this knight has no magical powers whatsoever. He began to wonder if there were any skills in this world that could conceal magical power from the life sensor. However, Lacan realized that there wasn't just one person, but three others. None of them possessed any magical power, leading him to suspect that these people might be imposters disguised as humans. The monster rammed violently into the horse, causing it to fall, and the knight on its back fell to the ground. They become vulnerable to the approaching monster. The knight thought it was the end for him, until a swirling stream of fire transformed into a ball of fire, fired from a horse-drawn carriage. Monster attack. Although she didn't kill it, the woman summoned a flame that stood proudly in the car, holding a short staff. Lacan was surprised to see fire magic being used. But the monster quickly recovered from the blow and immediately lunged towards the long-haired woman. The woman appeared frightened. The knights tried to rush to her protection, but they weren't fast enough. However, Lacan was quick. He leapt from his hiding place and stood in front of the carriage. He drew his sword and slashed at the monster's leg, causing it to deviate from its trajectory, and fell down next to the carriage. The knights tried to speak to Lacan, but he didn't understand them, especially since he was still focused on the monster, slowly getting up after the fall. If the monster had collided with the carriage with that much force, things will become extremely dangerous. Even though he only had 3 legs, the monster continued to fight with all its might. Lacan began to realize that the thick layer of fur, fat, and skin between its neck and back provided excellent protection for its body. If he could, he would finish it off with a single blow to the head, but his only option was to attack from the throat. Lacan lunged forward, slashing through the monster's neck. Take it down in just a few seconds. He astonished everyone around him with his skill and strength. He bowed his head in respect to the monster, as he had done with all the other creatures. Then he sheathed his sword, knowing that he had completely exhausted his magical power. Lacan dug into the monster's wounds, thinking that possessing a piece of it would be useful later. One of the guards approached Lacan and tried to speak to him. But it's clear that the language of the people in this world is completely different, even though they still look like humans. He uses his magical sensing skills to the fullest extent, and detected only a very slight magical response from the soldier in front of him. This led Lacan to confirm that he was indeed human. Humans in this new world seem to possess only an extremely small amount of magic, while others, such as those in the carriage, possessed more magic. 2 women stepped out of the carriage, and one of them bowed his head in respect to Lacan. Start talking to him in a language he doesn't understand. Lacan realized that this girl possessed the magical power he had sensed before, and gradually realized that she might be a person of high social standing. Lacan, the dark-haired man, finally spoke in the language he knew, and explained that he couldn't understand the girl, and that perhaps she wouldn't understand him either. After a moment of silence, he put his sword down and bowed his head before the little girl, in return for the respect she had shown him. This action surprised the girl greatly, because bowing is a ritual in the royal palace. In Lacan's previous world, he wondered if it was understood correctly in this new world. The 2 women began talking to each other. They seemed to be talking about Lacan, and after a while of arguing, the taller woman sighed and agreed with what the little girl said. The little girl walked closer to Lacan. She gently took his hand and gestured toward a building in the distance. She tried to convey that she wanted him to come to her place. Lacan nodded in acceptance of the invitation, partly because these people seemed friendly and partly because he needed to communicate with the locals. He walked for a while and began putting his belongings into the usual storage area. Instead of using their storage skills, to avoid demonstrating any extraordinary abilities in this new world. By doing those things, he hoped to look like an ordinary tourist. When he returned, Lacan found the little girl using healing magic on the guards, those who tried to protect the carriage from the monster. He used to think that taller girls had higher status, but the little girl's magical abilities were significantly superior. They led Lacan into the carriage, and although he was initially almost hesitant about the idea, he finally complied. They quickly took him to the territory of the feudal Lord Zademore. Lacan sat calmly on the stone slabs. when he was served a drink by a maid, while the two men were discussing him in a nearby building. The head of the Zademore family, Zanjikel, looked out the window toward Lacan and asked Isaac, one of the knights who had accompanied the two women, his thoughts on the man sitting outside. Isaac quickly replied that Lacan possessed formidable military strength, but he was also someone who knew how to reciprocate when thanked. Zanjikel was impressed when he heard the knight speak well of the black-haired stranger. But he wasn't too worried about Lacan's presence because he had saved Zanjikel's daughter. The head of the family told Isaac that he would assign the task of protecting this special guest. Isaac, however, was free to decide what to do next. Time passed and a year went by. Birds fly across the forest sky. Lacan can be seen charging forward, gripping his sword tightly at his side. He sensed the presence of two magical monsters and jumped over a tree stump toward them. They immediately recognized the dark-haired adventurer and began to growl, preparing for battle. However, they had no chance of winning, as Lacan sliced through the two massive monsters in just a few seconds. Then he bowed his head in respect to their deaths. Lacan returned from his mission and entered his residence. I opened the wooden door and received a good morning greeting from Isaac. The knight praised him for his speed in hunting. Lacan returned the greeting. However, he knew that Isaac was eager to spar with him again. That day, Lacan threw his sword to Isaac, and they both stepped out in front of the log cabin where Lacan was staying to prepare for the mini-match. Both gripped their swords tightly, one holding it relaxed while the other raised his blade high. Isaac was the first to attack, and the two swords clashed for a moment, seemingly evenly matched in strength. Lacan stayed at the Zademore estate for a year, and during that time he learned much of the local language, which had been difficult for him at first, although he was initially viewed with suspicion. Thanks to the respect of Lady Luvianafel, daughter of the feudal lord, and Sir Isaac, Lacan fully integrated as a member of the feudal family. Lacan and Isaac continued their duel, until Lacan emerged victorious, raising his sword to the knight's neck. This forced Isaac to concede defeat. Isaac sighed, admitting that he was still not ready to face Lacan. However, their conversation was interrupted when more people began to approach, realizing that a sparring match was taking place. This made everyone want a chance to test their skills against Lacan. Recently, the area in front of Lacan's log cabin has gradually become a training ground, but none of the men can do much against Lacan due to his superior skills. They consistently lost in matches against him, until an old woman approached him to get his attention before he could participate in any more matches. She came to inform him that Miss Luvianafel had called him and asked him to come after breakfast. And if possible, you shouldn't come looking as sweaty as you are now. The dark-haired man remained silent for a moment before bowing, then go change into an elegant outfit, something he still doesn't seem used to, even after being here for a year. Little girl, Lovey. She greeted Lacan, and he responded by bowing and calling her Luvi instead of her full name. This was because she herself had asked him to call her by this nickname instead of her official name, and he had to comply. Even if this goes against the rules set by Gria, Luvi Marinka's maid. Luvi made a request for Lacan to protect her on the way to a specific cliff. Lacan agreed on the condition that Isaac designate him to accompany her. Luvi insisted that she had received permission from her father and was only preparing to tell Isaac. Before changing the subject, it was suggested that Lacan wear casual clothes instead of the fancy outfits he was usually asked to wear. Lacan found it amusing to realize that he had had to change clothes several times since morning. He changed into a vest made from rare materials, capable of protecting him from rock spiders, a species with excellent defensive magic. He also wore pants made from a blend of rare resources. He donned a cloak made from the skin of the Bear King to enhance his magical defenses. On his collar, he has a precious gem to aid his self-healing abilities. Lacan feels comfortable in the gear he's used to using, and Isaac quickly called him. She demanded that he immediately go and protect the young lady's carriage. When they saw Lacan, Isaac was about to comment on his appearance, but then he dismissed the thought and sighed as he walked towards the carriage. Whatever Lacan looks like, he certainly doesn't resemble a bodyguard of an aristocratic family. As they reached the mountainous region, Lacan walked close beside the carriage. His main job was to protect the patriarch and young lady of the family, especially when they went out. This was an easy job for him, as they seemed to only go into the woods or the suburbs instead of town. However, that made things a little too easy for Lacan. The Zademore family accepted a complete stranger like him far too easily, but he didn't come to this world to live a peaceful life. He came here to discover things he had never seen before, to fight powerful enemies he'd never faced before, and to seek wealth and power. It seems this world also has labyrinths, similar to those Lekin was familiar with from his previous world, sparking his interest in exploring them in the future. However, his thoughts were interrupted by the appearance of a magical beast in the area. This caused Lacan to advance toward Isak. He signaled that he would deal with the monster before it got any closer. Lekin charged toward the beast and saw it climbing down from one of the nearby trees. It's a spider monkey, and it immediately lunged at him. Lekin dodged the attack, but the monster decided to prepare for a breath attack. However, Lacan reacted more quickly upon hearing the threatening sounds, and lunged towards it, slashing at its throat before it could launch an attack. The spider monkey was stunned for a moment, before Lacan delivered the finishing blow, behead it before it can react, and its body fell to the ground, lifeless. Lekin quickly dug the magic stone out of the monster's corpse, because he was used to the fact that this world also valued magic stones. In addition to their use in major rituals and magic, magic stones are also raw materials for crafting magic potions and magical tools. Lekin returned and threw the stone at Isak. The man smiled and nodded. Then they continued their journey to their destination. Finally, they arrived, and Luvi was told to step out of the carriage. She happily obeyed and stepped out, and ran happily, which worried Isak for a moment. However, there's nothing to worry about, for it seemed all she wanted was to stand on the edge of the cliff and gaze at the breathtaking view stretching before her. The young lady was in a better mood than usual today, but Lacan was in a fleeting moment. I could almost see a fleeting hint of sadness on Luvi's face. Marinka was adjusting Luvi's hair before finalizing the look by putting a necklace on her, and the tall woman complimented the little girl's beauty. The knights had arrived, and it was time for the celebration, and Luvi's father had captured everyone's attention. We announced that today is Luvi's official 14th birthday, marking her becoming an adult. Everyone cheered and celebrated this special day, raising their glasses in a toast and continuing the party. Knights were present at banquet tables that stretched across the mansion's vast hall, and Lacan stood next to one of them, staring intently at the large roasted chicken. A butler noticed this and asked Lacan if he wanted the chicken divided into smaller portions, to which he confirmed. The butler quickly fulfilled the request and brought Lacan a fresh plate of food. Lekin thanked them and began to eat, savor the delicious flavor of the dish, generously seasoned to create the perfect balance. While enjoying his meal, Lacan fell into deep thought and recalled that he had initially thought Luvi was just a simple child. However, he realized that in this world, a 14-year-old was already considered an adult. This means that marriage is permitted. Isak approached Lacan and began a conversation that initially seemed normal. They even asked if he wanted to try some wine. However, Isak suddenly fell silent for a moment, then indicated that he wanted to speak with Lekin privately. They went to a secluded corner to talk more privately. Isak explained to Lacan that he should stay away from the library for a while, which confused Lacan. Isak then explained that messengers from other families would be coming to visit and congratulate Luvi on her 14th birthday. It was common knowledge that none of the members of these noble families were as understanding as Luvi's family. They could cause unnecessary trouble if they discovered there was someone of unknown identity beside the young lady. A daughter of a noble lineage must shoulder the responsibility of connecting the bloodlines between the families, and everyone will try to present themselves as a worthy candidate for Luvi, even if only slightly. Isak apologized for making the request, and the conversation ended there. The following day, Lekin began hunting more frequently. This is because he has less time pressure since he doesn't have to protect the members of the mansion as much as before. He had been hunting for valuable prey near the mansion and decided to venture deeper into the mountains in search of a powerful magical beast. His wish quickly came true when he sensed a huge blue dot on his magic sensor, which surprised him with its incredibly strong reaction. It had only been 3 days since Lacan began his hunt, so he considered himself lucky to have encountered the monster so early. Lekin quickly drew his sword and hid behind a slope, waiting for the beast to come closer. After a few minutes, the green dot grew larger, and then a giant creature appeared. It looks like a combination of a turtle and a hedgehog. The monster is devouring one of the pig-like creatures Lekin once faced. This was the first time Lacan had seen this type of magical beast. It was about 10 feet tall and 20 feet wide, with a rather massive body. The monster had 3 eyes and 6 short legs. Lekin thought carefully about his next move. He realized that he didn't know the monster's weaknesses or how to attack it, which could cause problems. He wondered whether he should confront the beast before it realized his presence. But if Lacan does that and his slash doesn't work, he could be killed immediately. He knew that the action would be fruitless and too reckless, so he decided it was best to retreat. However, as Lekin turned to retreat, he accidentally stepped on a branch, Creating a small noise, the monster immediately raised its head, and the spines on its back began to stand on end. It signals that it is preparing to attack. Lycan soared into the air using a wind spell. He dodged each of the sharp thorns that were hurtling towards him. However, his wind magic wasn't for flying, and he realized that he couldn't maintain the distance any longer even if he used all of his magic. Suddenly, the stream of sharp thorns stopped for a moment. This confused Lycan until he realized that the monster was preparing an attack using its breath. He managed to dodge the attack just in time, but only narrowly. And the attempted dodge caused him to fall to the ground. The air turned freezing cold due to the attack. Lycan knew that if he took this hit with his current equipment, he would be in big trouble. So he decided to run into the forest, knowing that the monster moved slowly. Lycan ran into the forest hoping to shake off the monster, and after running 100 feet, he hid behind a tree to catch his breath. However, the monster curled up into a ball and crashed through the trees. I gradually caught up with him. Lycan knew he needed a plan to get out of it, until he noticed a cliff in the distance. He decided to fly up alongside the cliff while the monster continued to chase them. When Lycan arrived, he hid behind a tree, waiting. The monster looked around confused because it couldn't find him. Before slowly leaving, Lycan was astonished by the beast's power. He pulled out a few magic stones to restore his magic. Then he remembered that he had a bottle of medicine provided by the Zydmore family, which you haven't tried yet. However, when you drink it, he almost spat it out immediately. Because of its unpleasant taste, it's almost impossible to drink. Although he had taken some of the medicine, it didn't show any signs of complete recovery, and he decided not to take the rest if it didn't help him recover quickly. Lycan attempts to use medicine from his old world, but it also proved to be weak, and it's impossible to restore his magic. This means he needs to find an alternative source from elsewhere. If he were to encounter that magical monster again, he would most likely not escape unharmed. On the way back to Zydmore Manor, Lycan noticed the arrival of a carriage belonging to a noble family. He assumed there was a guest staying over while he went out hunting. However, what caught his attention most was the opulent luxury of the carriage. It was completely different from anything he had ever seen. A few days later, at night, Lycan suddenly woke up because he had a feeling something was wrong. He sensed the presence of a magical creature, and it was heading straight towards the main building where Luvi and Marinka were. Lycan quickly grabbed his sword and armor, preparing to face the threat. Lycan realized that it was an intruder, and quickly rushed towards the enemy to protect those inside the mansion. He ran to the main building, where he saw a woman easily climbing the outer wall, then jumping onto the roof. Lycan immediately realized that this woman was an extremely skilled assassin. When he realized that this woman was heading towards Luvi's bedroom, Lycan knew he wouldn't make it in time if he used the stairs. Immediately, he used his wind skills to fly onto the roof. Meanwhile, the assassin used a rope to rappel down from the roof. Standing right outside Luvi's bedroom window, Luvi is fast asleep when the woman pulled out a dagger and tried to pry open the window, but Lycan was faster. He jumped down and beheaded the assassin before she could react. When the assassin's body fell to the ground, Lycan grabbed the rope and looked out the window, seeing Luvi still fast asleep. He breathed a sigh of relief knowing that she was safe. Luvi and Isaac's father appeared with a somber expression as he looked down at the assassin's body. The head of the family, Zanjikael, felt disappointed in himself for being so naive as to only place a night guard outside his daughter's room without increasing security elsewhere. Zanjikael said that the decision had been made for Luvi to marry into the Shah Dresta family, an aristocratic family with royal ties. He had anticipated interference since Luvi was a rural noblewoman, and she would become the queen consort of the next patriarch of that family. However, he did not expect that assassins would be sent to kill her. Isaac wondered if it was possible to capture the female assassin alive without killing her. But Zanjikael sided with Lycan and explained that the female assassin might have chosen death if she had been captured, and will refuse to confess anything. Furthermore, even if they knew who the mastermind was, there was nothing they could do right now. It's best not to know too much. Luvi's father wondered how Lycan was able to climb the wall and killed the assassin so quickly. But Lycan remained silent about his power. Zanjikael decided not to force the dark-haired man to explain. Instead, we thank Lycan for his efforts and hope he will continue to protect his daughter. Lycan bowed his head and agreed to continue his protective duties. Another night, another assassin appeared with the goal of assassinating Luvi. He leaped over the brick wall, raised his crossbow. But before they could act, Lycan quickly leaped up and beheaded him. This was the fourth assassin to try to kill Luvi, and Lycan felt weary just from thinking about the enemy's persistence. Until Luvi's wedding is safely concluded, he knows he won't be able to leave this mission. The next day, he had a conversation with the young woman about his hometown and things related to him. Luffy calls him La Envie, a rare title bestowed upon those believed to be from another world. According to legend, these people possessed extraordinary powers. But for many, it's just a legend. However, Luffy believes that Lacan was actually one of those people. The elderly housekeeper tried to get Luffy's attention and reminded her that it was time for other appointments, which disappointed the girl. Lacan is preparing to leave, but the young girl called him back and asked him to show her the red gem on her chest. This came as a huge shock to Lacan. He quickly tried to ensure that no one else could see the gem. Marinka, the tall woman, held out a plate, and Lacan placed the gem on it. Luffy gazed at it with admiration before taking off her necklace, and she asked the tall woman to give it to Lacan. This action made the old servant feel anxious, and she tried to warn Luffy not to do that, but the young girl was determined, and Lacan began to feel uneasy about exchanging the red gem, something that he knew was extremely important to him. However, he couldn't refuse, as that would embarrass Luffy, though she didn't know that the gem was a testament to the life Lacan had lived. When you place your hand on your chest, Lacan's body seemed to automatically bend down and accept the exchange. This surprised him while Luffy smiled warmly. Lacan left the room. He walked down the corridor, thinking about why he had agreed to trade his gem. He decided to ignore those thoughts and feelings, because soon he will be leaving the mansion. Try to withdraw before the wedding preparations are complete. Luffy might be sad, but with time, she will forget about the stray wolf. However, Lacan soon realized that he wouldn't get a chance to leave. Luffy quickly completed the preparations and reinforced the night watch team before the big day. 2 days later, Miss Luvianafel would leave for a distant town to marry into her husband's family. Lacan sat beside a tree, gazing into the distance at the vegetable field before him. Morta, a man, approached him and teased Lacan about his intense gaze at the vegetable beds. He asked if he found it interesting. Lacan greeted Morta and chewed on a grieful leaf that Morta had brought him. They sat together in silence, gazing into the distance, until Morta broke the silence and said that he noticed the nights. Lacan hasn't been training much lately, so I asked him if something had happened. Lacan admitted that he no longer had the motivation, but Morta felt that Lacan seemed to have no energy at all. Morta agreed that everyone in the mansion seemed to be in a similar state. Ever since Luffy went away to get married, the atmosphere has become lonely. This caused Lacan to sink into deep thought. He recalled the time he felt lonely in his previous world. Before Luffy gave Lacan a place to belong in the present world, he had always felt alone. At least for now, he wished to repay her kindness before leaving the mansion. But he wondered what he could do, until he remembers about the magical beast he had trouble dealing with a few days ago, and knowing that the other knights couldn't handle it. Lacan realized that the best way to repay Luffy's kindness was to fight, and through fighting, he could protect those she cared about. Immediately, he went back to change his clothes and look for a new weapon to carry with him. However, he couldn't find any weapon resembling a spear designed for dealing with large monsters. For the time being, Lacan decided to try fighting the monster one more time, and assess the opponent's capabilities before taking any further action. He returned to the forest. He had encountered the monster before and found himself facing a similar situation again, with the monster rolling toward him. Lacan uses his wind ability to dodge, causing the monster to crash into a tree. Because it cannot change direction suddenly, the monster stood up and looked around. Tried to find Lacan, but he jumped from a height, and tried to slash at the top of the monster's head. However, Lacan's attack didn't even scratch the monster. This clearly shows its incredible toughness and flexibility. The monster turned around and prepared to attack with its breath, before suddenly shooting out sharp needles. It hit Lacan and destroyed his weapon. Realizing the situation was critical, Lacan decided he needed to keep his distance from the monster. He continuously used his wind-based skills to quickly retreat, while the monster roared in anger. Lacan was completely exhausted, and trudged through the door of his house. She collapsed onto the bed with a weary sigh after tossing her robe aside. He was still shocked by the monster's combination of breath attacks and sharp needles. This would have put him in great danger if he hadn't been carrying a top-grade magic potion. However, the issue of magic potions was also a headache for Lacan. Lacan possessed many mid-level magic potions, but he still didn't fully understand the herbs and raw materials, nor how to use them correctly. In any case, Lacan realized that he needed to find a doctor or an alchemist to learn how to produce higher-quality potions. This was to ensure he could create better potions for future battles. Although the battle that day didn't bring a complete victory, Lacan gathered valuable information about the monster's strength and how to deal with it later. The biggest problem is figuring out how to attack this monster. Its neck near the front of the spines, though exposed, was incredibly tough and durable. Lycan thought he should have aimed for its eyes in the stealth attack, but the chances of striking its weak point again were slim. If its weak point is near the throat, the attack would be extremely dangerous, even with the right weapon. Lycan thought of Bod, who might be better suited to dealing with this kind of monster. However, Lycan knew that he would soon have to fight the monster again, and find a way to escape, because the longer it dragged on, the harder it would be to defeat it. Once again, he prepared for his next battle with this monster. Lycan is looking for the monster, and quickly realized it was curled up and sleeping nearby. Give him another chance. He looked at the necklace Livy had given him, and began to believe that there could be benefits to it. Slowly approaching the monster, Lycan drew his sword, wondering where to aim. He quickly decided that his target was its third eye. If he could destroy it, he would have the advantage. Lycan leaped out of his hiding place and aimed for the eye, but the monster immediately woke up and dodged out of the path of his sword. However, this time, he actually succeeded in piercing the monster's skin. This confused Lycan, as it was the same spot he had attacked before. So what was different this time? When he struck down beside the monster's head, it roared and charged forward. Try to bite him. Lycan quickly jumped back before the monster could launch its attack. Lycan realized what could have changed. And look at the gem that Luvi had given him. He thought it might have amplified his attack power. He tried to deny the idea, but whatever the real reason, he knew for sure that he could now cut through the monster's flesh and defeat it. The monster returned, as if it were about to run away. But then it shot out sharp spikes. This indicates that it has exhausted its front spines. Lycan decided to trick the monster into turning back to face him, although it can use breath attacks, thanks to the Bear King leather cloak. He can withstand that attack. The monster coiled up and lunged at Lycan once more. In the forest where it used to be, it is very difficult to dodge its coiled attack. But this time they were on rocky ground. Lycan jumped out of its path. This caused the monster to lose its balance and tumble across the rough ground. This was the opportunity Lycan had been waiting for. He lunged forward and cut off the monster's jaw. Finally kill it, with a final sigh and a bow of respect for the creature that had been killed. Lycan knew that he could now leave without anything holding him back, ready to embark on his new adventure. Lycan was traveling through the lands and stopped near a bridge. He sat by the fire eating fried fish until a few men approached. They asked him if he was an adventurer, and when Lycan confirmed it, they asked him to help deal with a creature called a Zog. That caused them trouble. Lycan had never heard of a Zog, which surprised the villagers. He quickly concocted a half-truth about being from the north and not knowing the language of that land. A Zog is a type of ghost, different from a magical monster because it is not a living creature. It is considered a spirit that spontaneously arises in forests or labyrinths. A Zog's form resembled a human, but it lacked eyes and had horns. Lycan knew that there was a missing child in the village, and the child's family had gone searching for him. The baby's mother was attacked, while the father luckily escaped. It was recounted that the attacker was a Zog. The reward for this was just a piece of silver. But Lycan thought it was worthwhile because all he needed right now was information about the world. And practical experience. He accepted the villagers' request, as long as they provide him with food and a place to stay overnight. The villagers agreed to the conditions and arranged for Lycan to stay in an old stable. Very different from Zademore Mansion, but at least it could provide shelter from the rain and dew. Before leaving the Zademore family, together with Isaac, they wished Lycan good luck on his journey and told him to keep his identity as a L'Envie a secret. They also gave him a parting gift, a large sum of money to prepare for his journey. When a new day begins, one of the villagers led Lycan into the forest, arriving at the scene of the attack, and surprisingly it wasn't too far from the village. The man in the hat was ready to leave, but Lycan stopped him, and said he could sense the ghost within a 300-foot radius, and it would be dangerous if the man left alone. After a few minutes of walking, the two arrived and discovered a creature sitting under a tree. Lycan approached the creature, and it turned around standing upright, to reveal its terrifying form. Then suddenly the black-haired adventurer burst into the house, destroying the trees along the way. Lycan knew that this creature was very strong, but low in intelligence and slow-moving, which meant it wouldn't be a very difficult target. In just one quick movement, the monster's head was severed, and the battle ended. Upon returning to the village, Lycan apologized. Although he was unable to bring back a magic stone for the village, the villagers were even more surprised to learn that Lycan had defeated a Zag. A piece of silver was given to Lycan as a reward. Then he asked them if there were any good doctors around. And one of the old men said there was a doctor in the town of Volker. Lakin quickly left the bar and continued the journey to the next town. Stopped by a pub to find a relationship while eating and drinking. While he was enjoying his kebab, an old man walked into the crowded restaurant and struck up a conversation with him. I asked if he could take on an escort job. The mission is to protect a horse-drawn carriage for 4 days on its way to Volker, with a reward of 10 pieces of silver. Mentioning Volter immediately caught Leakin's attention, and he decided to take the job. After quickly paying for his meal, he went outside and followed the old man. His name is Ifen, and the owner of the shop was Cheney. He mentioned that there was another person who would also be escorting the carriage. Unexpectedly, a girl emerged from inside the car and introduced herself as Ida, a gold-ranked adventurer. However, what caught Lacan's attention was that this girl seemed to be the same age as Luvi, and he didn't look like a real adventurer at all. Lacan asks Ida about the ranks and organizations of adventurers, and Ivan began to explain that each adventurer would be ranked based on their abilities. This makes it easier for them to find a suitable job. The registration was something Lacan could do at Volker. They began preparing to depart, and Cheney told Ida to get off the carriage and walk, which confused her because she thought she could observe better from the carriage. However, Lacan understood that she was only making the car heavier. He thought Ida was just a useless rookie, even though she possessed a considerable amount of magical power. Not only was there something special about this girl, but it seemed that the client Ifen and Cheney were escorting also had something mysterious about him. Lacan announced to everyone that he would decide the position in the group and take on the role of leading the carriage, but Ada wanted to be at the front. Lacan didn't object to Ada's wish, but he reminded her that when under attack, the first person to go first will be the first target. This left Ida slightly flustered amidst her joy, but she managed to remain calm and said that she was doing him a favor if they switched places and he took the credit. Everyone then began their journey, and soon the sun set and it quickly turned into night. But the people in the car had prepared a magic tool. It glows brighter than candles or torches. Cheney told Afen that it was time to set up camp, and everyone dispersed to gather firewood and other ingredients. Cheney complimented Lacan on his ability to maintain a steady pace while leading the convoy, but Lacan didn't reciprocate, instead continuing to help set up camp. He noticed Cheney setting up a type of light-emitting device, something, and asked if it's for warding off evil spirits, because it feels similar to that kind of magic. Lacan had seen fire created from another magical tool, which made him wonder if such things were common among Volkers. Ifen came over and started preparing the meal for everyone. The two men discussed what to do with the young woman who was with them, and whether she can catch up with them. Lacan considered it a rather harsh comment. Although true, recalling that Ida had failed to catch up with the carriage after the third stop, Lacan could sense Ida from a distance and guessed that she had probably bumped into a tree along the way. However, his thoughts were interrupted when Ifen asked if he could go pick up Ida before the meal was finished. Lacan hesitated slightly because he would have to leave the client he was escorting, but they insisted that there would be no problems. Cheney asked if he needed a torch for the trip, but the dark-haired adventurer reassured him that the light from the stars was enough for him to see the way. When Lacan left the camp, he sensed something was wrong. He decided to use some magic stones to activate his wind skill. Find Ada quickly and get back to camp as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the men sitting around the table were still cooking, until the horses began showing signs of unease. Ifen was startled and decided to check on them, but he was astonished to see the eyes glowing in the darkness. It frightened him for a moment. But he was confused to see Lacan return so quickly with Ada. The girl smelled the food and immediately woke up. She apologized to everyone and explained that she seemed to have run into a tree and fainted. After dinner, everyone went to bed. But Lacan still couldn't fall asleep. Even though dawn was approaching, the protection against evil spirits was actually effective in keeping strange things away from the campsite. But Lacan knew something was wrong. He sensed a large number of magical beasts gathering around the edge of the protective barrier, numbering around 200. When dawn broke, Lacan went to wake Ida up. You have to eat and then leave immediately. This confused her. However, when informed that 200 magical beasts were approaching, Ida was immediately convinced. Cheney was disappointed that his attempt to ward off the monsters had actually done the opposite and attracted them. He thought he should move while the protective barrier against evil spirits was still in effect. But Lacan opposed this idea. He believed that moving would attract a large horde of monsters toward the town. This could lead to destruction. Lacan suggested that they should keep the protective barrier operational for safety, but address the issue once they had left the grassland area. Ida wondered what they would do with the food, but Lacan said that everyone could eat rations while traveling. And then they set off. Everyone is preparing for what's to come. As they left the forest, many monsters began to emerge from the treetops. Making them clearer, Ida was startled, but Ivan was confused because the number of monsters seemed to be less than what Lacan had said. The black-haired adventurer explained that the number might have been halved, as some of the beasts were unwilling to leave the mountain. Ida tried to suggest that they could let the garrison at Volker handle these monsters, but the men in the carriage objected to the idea because there was a village along the way that could be destroyed. Lacan observed the monsters that appeared and saw only low-level magical creatures, similar to ordinary wild animals. He couldn't sense any monsters with superior magical powers. With this observation, Lacan told Ida to protect the carriage, and he himself charged towards the horde of beasts. And charged towards the horde of monsters on his own. They killed them one by one without any difficulty. Then he bowed respectfully as usual, and then go back and tell everyone that the protective spell can be turned off. Everyone was amazed by his skills. Ada tried to ask him many questions about his identity, but Lacan mostly didn't answer until she asked about the ring he was wearing. This caused Lacan to stare at it and confirm that he was wearing the item. The group continued their journey and took another break on the third day. Ida complained about the red monkeys chasing them. Lacan tells Ida that the reason the red monkeys are targeting her is probably because of her scarf, as it stands out to magical creatures. Afin and Cheney thanked Lacan for his help, although they still had a long way to go. Ida is proud to participate, and confidently declared that everyone could rest assured as they continued their journey. However, Lacan unexpectedly asked to stop, because he sensed that 4 people were hiding ahead, possibly preparing to ambush them. Ida believes this is the time for her to showcase her abilities, but Lacan wasn't entirely convinced, since she hadn't even hit any monkeys the night before. When she mentioned being unable to use a bow at night, it confused Lacan. He asked her if she could use magic, but Eda also seemed confused and told him not to joke around. They continued going down. The road led closer and closer to where the people hiding might be waiting. Lacan told Ivan not to move the carriage until he gave the signal and told Eda to get ready, but not to shoot. Then he walked away and found where the 4 people were hiding. Lacan was impressed by their skill in concealing their presence and knowing exactly when the carriage would arrive. Lacan lunged toward one of them. Use that person as a shield before an arrow flies toward him. Then he slashed through the archer, and then used the wind skill to jump up. Attack and kill the remaining archer. Only 1 person remains. But he has a gun, a magical tool that Lacan knew needed to be dealt with immediately. Lacan uses his wind ability to deflect projectiles. Help him avoid it. However, a large explosion still occurred. This attracted the attention of the rest of the group. They rushed over to check the situation. However, the confusion quickly dissipated when they asked what had happened and if he was all right. Lacan reassured everyone that he was fine and that the explosion came from a magical device. Others wondered what to do with the robbers, but Ivan suggested they quickly continue their journey. Ida jumped down from the carriage when she realized that the bandits also wore adventurer badges of the same rank as hers, which angered her. However, the 2 men explained that perhaps the badges didn't belong to the bandits. Finally, they decided to continue their journey and try to reach the town of Volker as the sun begins to set. Ivan turned off the road, confusing Cheney until the old man explained that one should cleanse their body by the river to refresh themselves. Everyone enjoyed relaxing by the riverbank, but Ivan turned back and couldn't understand why Cheney hadn't arrived yet. When he explained that he didn't want to part with the wooden box he was holding, Ivan thought for a moment, then suddenly, using a spell, Lacan and Ida fell asleep. Then he pulled out a gun and pointed it at Cheney. Cheney felt confused and betrayed. He couldn't understand why his friend, who had been by his side for 5 years, had suddenly turned his back on him. But Afin was no longer the old man Cheney once knew. He revealed his true identity as Maracas, a cold-blooded killer. He should have been executed long ago, but it seems someone named Zykar saved him. Maracas admitted he had talked too much and was ready to shoot Cheney. But Cheney didn't seem frightened, because Lacan had prepared for this situation when Maracas turned back, intending to use his weapon. Lacan cut off Maracas's arm. The killer began to wonder why his sleeping spell wasn't working. Lacan did not reveal this secret, and proceeded to kill the old man. He felt disappointed because he had made so many mistakes, including revealing his own secret when he thought he had won. Finally, the group reached the town of Volker, and Lacan got the rest he needed. When he woke up, he got dressed, and went downstairs to have breakfast. He unintentionally offended Ada by not sitting next to her. By noon, Cheney arrived at the lodging. I had a meeting with Lacan and Ida. The girl received 2 silver coins as a reward. This confused her because they had previously agreed on $5. Cheney asked Ida to show him her adventurer's badge. When she did that, he flipped it over, and I saw the name engraved on it, Edadel. He remarked that the name sounded like a boy's name and asked how old she was. Because the promotion to silver happened 18 years ago, Ida began to panic when their secret is revealed and tried to run away, but Lacan quickly restrained her and told her to sit down. Cheney tries to warn Eda that impersonating another adventurer is a serious crime and would prevent her from registering under her real name, even if the badge she possesses belongs to her father. Cheney decided to turn a blind eye this time out of respect for her father, but he reminded her not to repeat it. Eda understood and left. After she left, Cheney gave Lacan his reward, a lump of gold. Lacan felt embarrassed and thought it was too much, but Cheney insisted, because Lacan deserved the award for his skill and work. Cheney also expressed his desire to build a good relationship with Lacan from now on. Lacan decided to accept the reward, but he quickly changed the subject and asked if Cheney could introduce him to a good doctor, as he wanted to learn how to make medicine. Cheney had someone in mind. However, she is known to be a difficult person to work with, and it was even difficult to meet in person. Lacan was asked to wait a few days while Cheney tried to arrange a meeting. After a few days, the meeting was scheduled, and Lacan was given a map leading to a little-known alleyway. Upon arriving, Lacan sensed an immense source of magical power, equivalent to a master of a grand labyrinth, or even more so. He walked in and saw a small wooden building, push open the wooden gate, and walk along the shade of the fence to reach the entrance. When Lacan arrived, he was told to go inside. Inside, he saw a monkey. This confused him for a moment until the voice continued, guiding him into another room. There, an old woman sat on a wooden chair. She introduced herself as Sheila, and the monkey as Jarek. Lacan was surprised by the existence of this woman. His naked eye saw an old woman, but his 3D perception perceived the figure of a young girl. His thoughts were interrupted when he sat down, and Sheila thanked him for defending Cheney, because she appears to be involved in this. Then she quickly shifted to the subject Lacan had come here to learn, the techniques of a doctor. Sheila asked why Lacan wanted to learn potion making, and he quickly explained that he was an adventurer, which made knowing how to create potions logical. However, another reason was that he discovered he seemed to have a fascination with making magic potions. The old woman asked him to show it to her, the medicine he made, and joked that she wanted to know where she could buy them. Nevertheless, Sheila was impressed with the quality of the medicine, with ingredients she had never seen before. This led Lacan to wonder if he had revealed too much. Suddenly, Sheila said she wanted him to take a test, to assess whether he has enough talent and whether one has the perseverance to become her student. The first step is to go to the Adventurers Association and receive a mission from the ministry. Without questioning it, Lacan followed the instructions and entered the building to speak with a woman. The woman introduced herself as Arya. He seemed to have heard about Lacan from Cheney and asked if he wanted to sign up. She took out a large box, and in the process raised a series of general questions about him. After a series of quick questions, Lacan is registered as a bronze-ranked adventurer by the Volker Adventurers Association, and his adventure badge will be ready. The following day, he inquired about the assignment from the ministry, and Arya explained that he could apply directly at the reception desk. Arya explained that the ministry's initiative was a support system, where rewards were tax-exempt for those without money. But if someone accumulates enough experience through it, they can easily get promoted. Lacan understood and requested that the task be prepared so he could receive it the next time he came to collect his badge the following day. As time went on, Lacan's first task was cleaning broken stones in an old man's garden one day. This left him perplexed by a task that seemed impossible to accomplish in such a short period of time. The old man explained that things turned out this way. This was due to an earthquake a few years ago, which also damaged the small house and the nearby field. This was his 12th request for the assignment from the ministry to be released. But so far, no one, perhaps only a powerful mage, has been able to actually fix it. Lacan realized this was like a small miracle the old man had been waiting for. But he decided he would complete the mission. He rolled up his sleeves, preparing to lift the heavy stones with both hands, working so hard just to receive a large copper coin, a job that many people had previously turned down. Lacan wondered what the criteria were for passing Sheila's test, but the old woman said she would be the one to decide when enough was enough. Lacan continued to struggle with the task, moving all the stones in the garden, and eventually had to take off his shirt to make it easier. The old man stood beside him with a look of astonishment on his face when I saw Lacan clearing away the rocks. When the work was finished, Lacan told the old man that the house and the field could now be rebuilt with the stones cleared away. He stretched out his calloused hands, willing to accept a copper coin as a reward for completing the task. Lakin returned to the Adventurers Guild, and Arya remarked that it had taken him 4 days instead of 1 to complete the quest, but she ignored it and assigned him the next task. However, he hesitated about this mission. Because it is not labor work, he had to play a role like in a game. Lakin requested a postponement until the following day, and immediately went into the forest to clear his mind. He hunts down any magical monsters he encounters. The dark-haired adventurer was exhausted from everything, and a longing to return to the labyrinths, because that's what his life used to revolve around. This led him to sit down and reflect on what lessons from the past might help him in his next mission. The following day at the church orphanage, all the children looked up at Lacan with terrified expressions. She even started crying when he introduced himself, with a smile that seemed wicked. Lakin didn't expect this reaction, but he had a plan. Before long, the mission seemed complete, and Arya was delighted to hear that the orphanage asked Lacan to return another time. The woman was surprised to see everything go so smoothly, especially since Lakin had previously been unenthusiastic about the idea. He explained that he had gotten a clue from the labyrinths he had previously traversed. The boys seemed to behave like ape-like magical beasts, and the little girls were like crab-like monsters. These experiences helped Lacan understand how to approach and keep the children happy. Lakin asks Arya about her next request, but she said that Sheila had texted him to let him know that he had passed the test. This surprised him because the ending was so abrupt, because he thought the test would last a few more days. However, he was still pleased to hear that and prepared to leave the building. Just then, Arya called him over and said there was one last request from a man named Doni in Laoi village who was famous as a trainer of magical beasts. Lacan didn't question it much and accepted the task, then set off for the village of Laoi. Upon arrival, he met the homeowner and asked if this was Doni, the person who had submitted the request. The stranger confirmed his identity. Lacan introduced himself as the person assigned to the task. His job was to walk a magical creature, and immediately a monkey-like creature named Paladau jumped down from the tree above. Doni told the animal to greet the guests, and whispered commands using magic to control the actions of the Polito. Doni then explained to Lacan that all he needed to do was take the monkey for a walk through the woods on the other side until evening. This made Lacan suspicious of how easy the task was, especially since the reward was a large silver coin. But Doni insists that the task lies in the fact that Lacan will have to carry a large amount of food for the monkey throughout the journey. Lacan led Polito into the forest, and sit down and watch the monkey do whatever it wants. However, he began to feel confused when they saw Polito just staring blankly around without moving. This caused Lacan to approach menacingly, and immediately the ape become well-behaved. That was also when Lacan gradually understanding the problem, and return when the sun begins to set. However, Doni didn't seem pleased, and said he would not give the silver coin. Give Lacan until he completes a similar task the following day. Lacan directly asked if the real reason was that he hadn't let Polito escape. Doni was surprised that Lacan had realized this, and despite all his efforts, he was still able to bring the monkey back. The truth is, Doni is trying to get Polito to escape because in the past, many people in Valkyr pitted gibbons against woodwolves from the village of Labard. But the wolf pack kept winning. This made Doni worried about Polito's safety, especially when the Lord is trying to revive that tradition. Lacan thought Doni had made a mistake, whatever the reason, and explained that a monster would probably not be happy if it were forbidden to fight. He reminded Danny of his connection to Polito, when Danny turned to the monkey and asked if it was ready to fight for Danny. And asked if it was willing to fight for Danny. The monkey immediately showed excitement and ready for battle. The Lacan advised Doni to send another request to the association related to combat training for magical beasts, because Lacan wanted to train Polito himself. At least that's what he told Sheila. Lacan trained the monkey for 10 days. Although he didn't get the chance to witness the final match, he was absolutely confident that Polito would win. And indeed, Polito won. Although Doni won, he still tried to argue that the woodwolf was better suited for defense, to protect the gibbon monkeys and continue to help the weak. The competitors were not very happy, and insisted on a rematch after 10 years. But it seems Doni is now overwhelmed with coaching requests. The conversation then shifted to the topic of apprenticeship, something Lacan had been looking forward to. When he asked again to confirm, even though he had heard about it at the association, Sheila quickly confirmed that it was true. Sheila told Lacan that they were going out and gather herbs around Folker. One of the reasons she decided to settle there, they arrived at Verbed Falls, where Maraka's true identity is revealed. But this time, a young girl appeared instead of an old woman. Lacan showed no signs of panic or confusion, because he already knew that this woman was still Sheila. He explained his ability to see her in two forms at the same time. Sheila explained that it was more convenient for her to appear like that outside of town, and they both quickly set off to continue their work. The woman moved much faster than Lacan. This confused him when she told him to follow her. Lacan tried to chase as fast as possible, and they both eventually arrived at an area in the forest, a place where trees grow everywhere. Sheila asked why he was having trouble moving the stones in the garden, and why didn't you come to buy some recovery medicine? This confused Lacan until another woman claimed that Lacan was a Laonville. This darkened his expression as he glared at Sheila. Sheila explained that she knew this because Cheney had suspected him. Lacan realized he would have to do a better job of keeping his identity a secret, in case someone doesn't want to know, as it could cause danger in the future. Lacan went around the area gathering herbs, and Sheila taught them how to identify edible, poisonous, and ineffective varieties if handled improperly. A little while later, she handed him a bag containing a small box inside. This box is an almost infinite space. It helps to hold many items without making them feel heavy. Lacan explained that he also possesses a similar ability, and asked whether this type of power could bind to humans. Then he pulled a sword from inside his stomach. This shocked Sheila deeply. He's not sure what the limits of his storage space are, but it clearly may contain much more than Sheila has ever seen in her world. She warned Lacan that he should be careful. Don't let others take advantage of this ability. They continued gathering more herbs, and as darkness fell, the night appeared, signaling that it was time for dinner. Sheila uses a little magic to create light in the air, without needing to recite a mantra. This impressed Lacan because he had never done anything like it before. The woman told him that he possessed enough magical power to perform such feats. He just needs to practice enough to achieve it. She asked Lacan about how he acquired magic in his old world, and he explained that it was a rare ability he acquired from defeating magical monsters, especially the monsters in the large labyrinths. In today's world, it seems one must possess magical potential. Training and using it can only begin from birth. A person's magical power depends on their individual abilities and talents. All this information, this made Lacan realize that it was possible to learn magic through practice. Or instead of just relying on energy supplementation from the magic stones, Sheila was willing to teach him. And the first lesson was learning how to use the lantern-making spell. Lacan focused his energy on his hands, and a flash of light appeared before quickly disappearing. But that was enough to excite him because the magic had actually happened. Sheila was also impressed that Lacan was able to do it on his first try, and she told him he should practice this magic at different sizes and distances. Sheila's words seemed to fade into the wind when Lacan focuses completely with the enthusiasm of a child, continuously practicing and improving magic at a rapid pace, every second. As dawn broke, Lacan successfully collected 100 bags of each of the 22 types of herbs for Sheila. All thanks to him learning the lantern spell. However, the truth is he used his object sensing ability instead of magic, but for the time being he decided to keep this ability a secret. Sheila told him to put the bags of herbs in the storage space, and then they continued on to their next destination. However, the location was further away than Lacan had anticipated, as they had been running since early morning. Gradually he began to understand why Sheila chose the form of a young girl. Because it would certainly be surprising to see an old woman running so fast past everyone's eyes. Lacan decided it was time to try the stamina-restoring drug again, and this time he realized its clear effectiveness. It made his legs stronger and allowed him to continue running for a little longer. Currently, his priority is learning magic and potion-making skills before embarking on the next part of his journey. Finally, they arrived at a mine, filled with precious gems. These are things that will become versatile catalysts. Lacan amassed a large fortune thanks to his storage space. As they were preparing to leave, Lacan uses his lantern ability. Sheila was impressed by his speed of learning. However, that moment was interrupted by a man. He approached carrying a hoe. This man claimed that the cave belonged to him from 5 years ago, despite Sheila having used it for over 100 years. Sheila decided this would be another lesson. Give it to Lacan and use a spell called petrification. This made the man prepare to attack Lacan. Stay still. Then she used another spell, draining the water dry. This caused the stranger to convulse and turn into dust before Lacan's eyes. Sheila said that the best thing is to witness magic firsthand. Lacan is still trying to process the full truth about this woman's identity, wondering if he made a mistake in learning from her. But was woken up by Sheila's monkey. This startled him, causing him to shout in surprise. The old woman entered the room and told Lacan to get ready for the day. He got up and went into another room. Use a belt to pull the bundles of herbs closer to yourself. hang them from the ceiling. Practice magic until you become proficient. Lekin patiently practiced new spells before he could learn more difficult ones. After a long day of hard work, everything was finally cleaned up. The food was clean, made from ingredients the two men brought back from the forest. However, Lacan began to feel sleepy from exhaustion. Sheila woke him up. They said they would go to town to sell the boxes of rosemary, the kind used to ward off magical creatures, for a man from another store. The man gave Sheila a bag of gold coins. The quantity surprised Lacan because it was just weeds. After that, they both left and continued to visit other places in town. Lacan asked if the herbal medicine would work on Jericho. Sheila explained that she had used magic to protect the monkey, preventing the medicine from affecting it. They finished their workday, and Sheila remembered that Lacan wanted to explore a maze. She suggested he take 10 days off so he could visit the maze. The nearest labyrinth, Golber, is 2 days' journey away. But with the power of Lacan, the travel time will be even less than that. Before setting off, he decided to find out more information about this labyrinth. However, his thoughts were interrupted when a man approached and said he had a message from his employer. Cheney, invite Lacan to dinner. The two met and Lacan thanked Cheney because she helped him become Sheila's student. Cheney also wanted to thank Lacan for his contributions. After a while of eating and drinking, Cheney immediately got straight to the point of the meeting. He said that the gun Maracas used was made by a close friend of Sheila's. Cheney expressed his astonishment as to why the weapon had fallen into the hands of an assassin, and suggested that Lacan should show it to Sheila to find out more information. Lacan began to realize that he was gradually letting his guard down around this man, and there's an internal struggle about whether that's okay or not. He decided to change the subject and asked about Golber's labyrinth. Cheney provided information on where to buy the map, and some vague information about this labyrinth. Once you have everything you need, Lacan departed, heading towards the labyrinthine capital of Golber. The following day, Lacan spotted a group of knights pushing through the crowds in town without caring about anyone. They caught his attention because these are the people Cheney had warned about earlier. Lacan, the dark-haired adventurer, recalled Cheney's warning not to get involved with that group of horsemen. The reason is that they had previously tracked down and blackmailed another explorer, the person who retrieved a treasure from the labyrinth, a dagger of extremely high value. These so-called Earls is Knights forced the explorer to put the dagger up for auction and pretend that it is worth less than it actually is. All the bidders were connected to the Count. Lacan decided to steer clear of the town's main road. He went around to the back until he was suddenly called back by a guard. This soldier had a completely different demeanor from the Count's group of knights. This made Lacan realize that there were many seasoned adventurers in the capital. As he approached the labyrinth, he saw a huge entrance gate, with many adventurers gathered. Everyone seemed happy and full of energy. Lacan tried to enter the labyrinth as quickly as possible, but a soldier stopped him and told him to queue at the back. This was something he wasn't familiar with, but he waited patiently. When he finally got inside, he took a deep breath, smiled, and opened the map. However, he was surprised to find that the others seemed to have disappeared and reappeared on the same floor where he was standing. Lacan decided to ignore the unfamiliarity and continue forward, believing that the deeper he went into the labyrinth, the better he would understand the place. When he reached the staircase leading down to the lower floors, he was surprised by their enormous size. He realized that his life sensor couldn't sense the lower floors from the first floor. On the first floor, only red monkeys, not a significant opponent for him. Lacan quickly advanced to the deeper levels, where the Timberwolves live. But they weren't strong enough to cause him any trouble either. However, they dropped a box containing a small item. But he didn't realize it. Cries for help echoed from inside the cave, and the two of them are being attacked by another wolf. Lacan quickly arrived to rescue them, and the beast. He also dropped a box containing a dagger inside. The boy thanked Lacan, but Lacan was focused into the small gem he had just obtained. He immediately asked the boy about it. The boy explained that it was a bottle of red medicine. Lacan told the boy to use it on the girl lying on the ground. The boy apologized to the girl and quickly complied. And the medicine takes effect immediately. Lacan assured the boy that there was no need to repay him, then turned and left, because he has obtained the information he wanted. The third level seemed to be made entirely of rock, and nothing else in the big cave. At least, that's what he initially thought. Some rocks are no different from others, yet they possess magical powers. This made Lacan wonder if it was the monster of this floor. He tried to chop through a slab. He discovered that it had a slimy consistency, and his sword had no effect on it. Lacan turned around to observe how the other adventurers were dealing with the problem, and noticed that these rocks seemed weak against magic. This prompted him to take out an item he had kept stored in the warehouse, a lightning dragon glove. It will emit lightning bolts when magic passes through it. And he experimented on one of the magic stones. Instant success. Lakin smiled, realizing that labyrinths were truly where he felt most alive. Lakin cannot remember the names or pictures of his parents. All his childhood memories are hazy, and it's all negative. Eventually, he was adopted into an orphanage, only to discover that the nuns there were incredibly strict and cruel. This caused Lacan to run away from the orphanage. He ran in a random direction and accidentally got lost in a maze. Lacan enters the labyrinth and was immediately attacked by a monster. I was pinned down by it before I realized it. There's a sword next to it, and Lacan used it to stab the monster in the eye. Finish it off. That was the first time Lacan felt the adrenaline and energy of a battle. And he craved more. Continuing on his path, he gradually developed the skills and strength to fight, while also earning a considerable amount of money. The labyrinth is harsh but very fair. On the 25th floor of the Goldbur labyrinth, Lacan uses his wind ability to leap atop a monstrous spider and stab it in the head. On the 26th floor, he stopped to check the items he had collected, and we decided it was time to stop and return for the day. Upon exiting the labyrinth, Lacan was stopped by a group of soldiers and asked to follow them, because there are a few things they want to ask. He was led to meet Captain Doug. People call Lacan the Demon King, and take him into the room to talk about the complaints that people have filed against him. It seems many people felt threatened by his presence on the first levels of the labyrinth. There were also allegations that Lacan had attacked several people, but he insists he didn't do it. He also asked if there would be any problem if he actually did that. Doug explained that his job was to protect young adventurers and deal with powerful people. He looked out of place to prevent them from causing problems. Lacan began to understand anxiety, which he may have created and why he is considered a demon king in the eyes of others. The older man was impressed by how easily Lacan understood the problem and are willing to change their behavior. When Lacan heard that he had apparently caused injury to another team, he immediately took out 2 bottles of antiseptic solution and gave them to Doug, asking him to take them to the injured group. Doug was surprised to see such valuable items being given away so easily, and realized that Lacan was a good person. He also praised Lacan's abilities for having reached the 26th floor of the labyrinth. Lacan then inquired about the methods of buying and selling goods within the building where they were standing. He decided to take the items he had collected in the labyrinth out of his bag, pour them onto the table. Doug stared in astonishment at the large number of items, and the soldiers rushed in when they heard the noise. Everyone was stunned by what Lacan had achieved. In just 5 days, the soldiers didn't have enough money right then to pay for all the items. So Lacan said he would stay in town overnight and return tomorrow to collect the money. Then he quickly changed the subject. I asked Doug to recommend a hostel that offered good meals. After completing the task and returned to Walter, Ida ran up to meet Lacan, but he continued to ignore her until he suddenly said that she was just a stranger. Just pull him down. However, Ida's spirit was not broken. She continued trying to convince Lacan to become her adventurous partner. Lacan unexpectedly told Ida that she was a magic user, and you should learn how to use it so you can handle things on your own. He walked away. Those words left the girl stunned. On Sheila's way home, Lacan recounted everything that had happened in the labyrinth and expressed satisfaction at having gone. I even thought about going back there on my next vacation. However, their conversation was interrupted when Ida knocked on the door. She appears to have followed Lacan here. Sheila reminded them both not to make noise and invited the girl in for tea, regardless of Ida's rudeness in coming there without permission. Lacan tells Ida that he cannot teach her magic. This left her bewildered. He explained that she had magical potential, but teaching it wouldn't be easy. Sheila unexpectedly suggested that perhaps teaching Ida will be helpful to Lacan, allowing him to improve his skills. They will also be rewarded if successful. She promised to teach Lacan the rocket arrow spell if he succeeded in guiding Ida. With a weary sigh, Lacan agreed, and Sheila asked Ida to keep everything a secret, something the girl happily and quickly agreed to do.